Praise to the nation of gods and earth, sister God, King Saeem, Supreme God Allah, aka Saeem Allah, aka PGA, for all those not from Allah's paradise, New Jerusalem. That's pretty God Allah. I was dubbed that by the God Savior King, Freedom Master, Prince, the God, rest in power, my great brother Everlasting, and a few other brothers who I had the pleasure of knowing and building with. Abraham Lincoln was not this great man that everyone think that he was. Abraham Lincoln did not initially want to free the slaves, and in many of his speeches he said, "You suffer from being here amongst us, and we suffer having you amongst us. If I could uh, keep the Union together by not freeing a single slave, I will. If I could keep the Union together by freeing only half, I will." Your freedom was something that the kingdoms of France and England was putting pressure on the United States to abolish. Along with, I'm not going to say that there was no good Caucasians fighting for that, because there was. There's a Caucasian named John Brown that many should take a look at, but it was not Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln also said, "With you being here, there will always be a conflict of superior and inferior. And I, like any white man, keep in mind, the key word is want. I want my race to be superior." And the reason why he said, see, when you want something, it's because the other person has it. You got to follow those words. You have to understand. And go get you a black dictionary, because a lot of words have dual meanings. You have to understand the word and how he worded it. Just like any white man, I want my race of people to be superior. When you want something, it's because you don't have it. Because if you have it, you don't want for it. It's yours. You know it's yours. You don't want for it. So what was he telling us? All of you house Negroes, man, running around here, not educating your babies properly, allowing your kids to quote a rapper. You're pregnant while your daughter's pregnant. You're in the club with your sons, telling them to tell the girls you're their older brother. Only a fool will allow the enemy to educate his child. Let me get that to you one more again. Only a fool will allow the enemy to educate his child. We have allowed, and we've allowed them to take Black History away from us. Black History Month. I remember learning at one point in time, it wasn't even a month. It was Black History Week. And then, yeah. And then they gave us the shortest month out of the year. That wasn't by accident. That wasn't because, we had so many black heroes who were born in February. No, if that's what you're thinking. It's not because Lincoln's birthday is in February and he free. Have you read the Emancipation Proclamation? Some of y'all are so deaf, dumb, and blind that it's sickening. That you had this African brother, he had a ministry, and he started to find flaws in the Bible. And when he started to present it to his congregation, they began to challenge him. And he said, "Look here," and I'm not fluent with it, and he said, "Well, look here." In this one verse, it says, this king started ruling at 18. He says, now we're going to go 2 paragraphs down, and it states now that this king, instead of 18 years old, was 8 years old. You have these people saying the Bible was written by God. The Bible was not, well, in fact, it was, because it was written by original men and then rewritten over and over and over and over and over and over again by those Caucasians who came in and raped, pillaged, and plundered Africa for all its riches and philosophies and everything else they took. I'm gonna say this real quick before I lose this train of thought. Um, the guy who ran the patent office in the early 1900s said this: for every white inventor that comes in here with a patent for a new invention, there's 5 black inventors behind him. They didn't make stuff to make our jobs easier, the cotton gin, lights, the telephone. They didn't make these things to make their jobs easier. It was the slaves who made all of these inventions to make their lives easier. They had to work by night by candlelight. Well, you know what? Let's try to make a better system of lighting. Every invention that you have in the United States, in the demand, I'm gonna come back with his name, who ran the patent office in the early 1900s. He says for every patent that a white inventor brings in, there's 5 black inventors that you don't know nothing about. That history has wiped their names away. You think Thomas Edison did that? If you designed a light bulb, right? Why would you need an African slave to describe to you how it works? Why would you have him describe it? If you made it, you wouldn't need anyone to describe to you how it works. But back to this African pastor, and he started to say the Bible is not infallible. It's not historical. It's not historically correct. It's not geography correct. It's not science. Far from it. Very far from it. It is a book of metaphors that has been rewritten over 500,000 times since its original conception. If I give you a letter right now and says, listen, I want this letter back in 20 years, but in 20 years, I want you to hand it to 200 people. Do you think that letter is going to be the same letter that I wrote in 20 years when I get it back? Emphatically now, Cypher. We are allowing the inferior to trick us into believing that we are the inferior. Let me tell you what the Indian brother, who just happened to be a doctor, told me. He says, for any Indian man that tells you that he wasn't a slave is lying to you. He said, see, the difference is they just came into our country and took what they wanted and stayed and occupied it, which was worse than taking us away to their country. He said it was worse. He said just as many Indians died just not as many as Africans, but that they were slaves too. And any Indian person that tells you they weren't is lying to you. That was his design. That was his makeup, to enslave the original people of the planet. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not racist and I'm not prejudiced, so I would never indict a whole group of people on the action of, yes, so many. It's so hard not to. But my old Earth was Native American, and her father was my great grandmother was my grandmother was Native American. My grandfather was a Puerto Rican GI who came to the reservation to help the Indians learn how to read, write, vote, uh, and to fight back against the Virginians who were standing in the way of progress and didn't want them to vote. And he was promised if he didn't stop his work and go back to where he was from, he was going to be killed. So with a heavy heart, he went back to Puerto Rico. But my old Earth would say this. She would take out $100 bill and she would say, the only good cracker is a dead cracker. A small word for one lie on her. That's how she felt growing up on the reservation. After you owned all of this, after all of this is being yours, now you're watching your people be massacred and slaughtered and put on a tiny piece of land, and you're overcrowded, and you're feeding alcohol to the elders to take away from their spirituality so they could stop their rain dance. Don't you know the rain dance was one of the most prolific weapons that our ancestors had against the white man? That over in Oklahoma, when all the great chiefs got together and decided to have a rain dance to drive the white man out, they were so afraid that they told General Custer to go and massacre everyone that was there, men, women, and children. It's all in the history books. You ever heard of the massacre of Wounded Knee? Yeah, there was Cherokee Indians who had slaves at one point. But they weren't, they said they wasn't as harsh as, there was also blacks in here, and the freed blacks who also had slaves here in America. But you know what happened to the Cherokees? Just like the devil he is, they got jealous because they didn't beat their slaves the way they did. They treated them differently. They treated them as servants. So the poor white trash convinced the governor of North Carolina to take their land. They didn't deserve it. They were savages. And that's what happened. He called in the militia. It's called the Trail of Tears, where they marched them from North Carolina across the Midwest, having millions of them died. So and we're not Native Americans. We're Aborigines. We're not Native Americans at all. So let's stop. We're not. First of all, American means thief. Native means original. So we're not the original thieves. Just like Native means original to that land. So no, we are not Native Americans. And don't you ever call me that shit. And nor are we African Americans, or Afro Americans, because Afro means first and American means thief. So either way, you can't call us thieves because see, we didn't come here and take this land. We didn't take everything from them except their language, but only once. They've been doing it for centuries. And I'm not telling people, to have hate in your heart, because that would only consume you and destroy you. But the only solution to ignorance is intelligence. How could you call my ancestors red savages when they were here living superior to nature? When they had none of the diseases that the filthy Europeans had because they were in caves, mating with dogs. If you don't believe me, ask any doctor, what's the origins of syphilis? Syphilis is a canine-born disease, found in the canine first. Walking around on all fours, eating all of those animals from the big animals, throwing the garbage out in front for the jackals to come and eat. Don't you know the hills of Europe are not actually hills? They're actually garbage dumps. Ancient garbage dumps. That's what they are. See, a hill is man-made. That's why it can never be a mountain. But it's just sad that the Bible was something, Christianity was something that was forced upon you, forced upon your ancestors. Your ancestors was robbed from their religion, robbed of their culture, robbed of their gods. They were robbed of everything. And they were brought here, they were taught you be a good slave, and when you go to heaven, and when you die, you could go to heaven and have a break. But the white man said, I'm gonna have my heaven here though. Because you're gonna make it for me. Do you know after the Civil War, 5 years after the Civil War, they started to produce black millionaires? Because we were the farmers, the steel workers, the masons. We were the ones who built America. So once we got free, they had to come back for us, but this time they had to pay us. And this is where the Ku Klux Klan was birthed out of the hatred for the rich blacks. They were supposed to be the spooks, the ghosts of the fallen Confederate soldiers. So you mean to tell me that Confederate flag is not a symbol of racism? When the so-called ghost of the Confederate flags who carried that into battle and was killed came back to kill black people who were successful waving that flag, and that's not a flag, it's a sign of hatred? Why don't we have a monument of the 9/11 terrorists? Because that's what these Southern generals were. They were enemies against America. So why is there a statue erected of these people? I vote we put one up of Bin Laden. We're honoring terrorists anyway. It's King Saeed, man. It's time to stop playing checkers, man. Start playing chess. Oh, God told me this one day. He said, go back to Africa for what? When we were already here. He said, somebody tell you to go back to Africa. You tell them to get back on those filthy ass boats that carry syphilis and all the rest of the diseases that came over here. They killed more people with their cough, sneeze, and their dicks than they did with their guns because we didn't have those filthy diseases. We didn't inbreed with brothers and sisters, cousins and aunts, fathers and daughters. We didn't do that. That's why we don't suffer from the genetic defects that they do. Indian brother said this to me. I'm gonna make this short. Indian brother said this to me, who happens to be my doctor. Anything the sun kills doesn't belong in this universe. Peace.